All right, today we're going deep, really deep into a story that most folks probably haven't heard before.
Oh, definitely a hidden gem in Latter-day Saint history for sure.
We're talking about James J. Strang, and here's the kicker. This guy claimed to be the rightful successor to Joseph Smith.
It's true. And, most people, when they hear about leadership after Smith, they immediately think Brigham Young, right?
Right.
But Strang's story, it really makes you think twice, offers a whole different viewpoint.
So we're looking at this document, the diamond, and I'm assuming we're not talking about, like, jewelry here?
No sparkling gems this time, though it is a treasure in its own way.
Okay.
It's a pamphlet, actually, published back in 1848 by Strang's followers.
Uh-huh.
And it's basically their case for his leadership letters, accounts of angelic encounters, you name it, they put it all in there.
Wow. Okay, so let's just jump right in. What's the first thing they hit us with in this diamond pamphlet?
Well, they lead with their strongest piece of evidence, what they thought was the most convincing.
Okay.
A letter that Strang said he got from, get this, Joseph Smith himself.
No way. Are you serious?
And the date on this letter, just a few days, we're talking just days before Smith was assassinated.
Oh, wow. That's got to be a mic drop moment right there.
You could say that again?
So what's in the letter?
This letter, dated June 18th, 1844, it's like the foundation of Strang's whole claim.
Okay.
It predicts Smith's death, which is already a lot to process.
Yeah.
But then it goes on to specifically name Strang as the chosen successor, like straight up says this is the guy.
Wow. They were not messing around.
And it even gets more detailed, lays out a plan for a new settlement in Wisconsin.
They really thought of everything, huh? But I mean, come on, people had to be a little skeptical, right? Like even back then, that's a lot to take at face value.
Oh, absolutely. And Strang supporters knew that they actually spend a good chunk of the pamphlet defending the letter's authenticity. Like they knew people would question it.
Interesting.
They talk about how it went through the Postal Service, even mention things like there was a red postmark on it.
It's like they're saying, we know this sounds crazy, but hear us out. Look at the evidence.
Exactly. They're trying to get ahead of the skeptics.
So we've got this letter, which is already a bombshell. What else is in this diamond pamphlet? Like, what else did they include to make their case for Strang?
Well, they also talk about this incredible event, Strang's ordination.
Okay.
And get this, it supposedly happened on June 27th, 1844, the same day that Joseph Smith died.
Wait, hold on. The same day?
Same day.
But he wasn't anywhere near where Smith was.
Hundreds of miles away.
That's wild. Okay, I need to hear more about this ordination.
All right, so according to the pamphlet, Strang has this encounter with an angel in Wisconsin. And during this encounter, he's anointed and given what they call the everlasting priesthood.
This is some serious stuff.
You can imagine how powerful that would have seemed.
Oh, yeah. I mean, talk about divine timing. But I have to ask, how did Strang and his followers connect all of this, the letter, this ordination, to what the Latter-day Saint movement believes in? Like, did they just expect people to accept all of this at face value?
Okay, so that's where chapters 3 and 4 of the Diamond come in.
Right.
They switch gears a bit and start digging into the Doctrine and Covenants, pulling out passages that talk about how important it is to have continuous revelation.
Okay.
And to have a chosen successor who leads the church.
So they're trying to show that this isn't just some random claim. It lines up with what's already in the scriptures.
Exactly. They're saying, look, this is how we've always done things.
Right.
And they argue that according to their interpretation of these scriptures, Joseph Smith couldn't have just left the church without appointing someone to keep receiving revelation, to keep things going.
Interesting.
And they point to Strang's letter and his ordination as proof that he's the chosen one, the one who's supposed to lead.
That's a pretty strategic way to build their case.
It is. But remember, they weren't the only ones trying to become the new leader after Smith died.
Oh, right. There were other people who wanted to take charge, too.
Exactly. Other contenders, each with their own ideas and interpretations.
So how did Strang's supporters handle that? Like, did they address those other claims directly?
They did. They actually called out their rivals by name in the Diamond.
Oh, wow. Okay, who are we talking about here?
The two main ones were Sidney Rigdon and, of course, the 12 Apostles, the group that would eventually end up following Brigham Young.
So we've got Sidney Rigdon and the 12 Apostles all vying for leadership. Let's start with Rigdon. What was his argument, and how did Strang's camp counter it?
Well, Rigdon's argument was pretty straightforward. He was part of the first presidency with Joseph Smith,
right?
So he basically said, look, I was right there with Joseph. When he died, the authority naturally passed to me. Like seniority,
Yeah, I can see the logic there, a clear line of succession.
Exactly.
But Strang's followers weren't convinced.
Not at all. They believed that true leadership had to come directly from God, not just through some organizational structure.
So it wasn't enough to just hold a position.
Nope. They wanted divine appointment, a clear sign from heaven.
And that's where Strang's letter and ordination came in.
Exactly. They argued, look, Strang has the letter, he has the angelic encounter, Rigdon has what? They were really driving that point home.
I can see how they would see that as a pretty strong argument.
Oh, definitely.
So they tackled Rigdon, but what about the 12 apostles? That's a bigger challenge. I mean, they had a lot more people on their side.
Right, and that's where their strategy gets even more interesting.
Okay, how so?
So with the 12 apostles, they kind of went after their authority on two fronts, like a two-pronged attack.
Interesting. Okay, tell me more.
First, they questioned whether the 12 apostles even had the right to claim leadership in the first place.
Okay, I see. Going back to that whole direct line of succession from Joseph Smith.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They argued that the 12 apostles, they couldn't prove a direct connection to Joseph Smith's prophetic authority like Strang could.
So it's not enough to just be an apostle. You need that special mandate.
Exactly. They needed that undeniable proof, that divine stamp of approval.
Got it.
And then their second argument, this one was more about like looking at what was actually happening.
What do you mean?
They basically pointed to the chaos and hardship that followed Joseph Smith's death.
Right. It was a really tumultuous time.
Exactly. And they said, look at what's happening under the leadership of the 12 apostles. Is this what a divinely appointed leadership looks like?
So they're connecting their theological arguments to the actual lived experiences of the people.
Absolutely. They're saying this isn't just about abstract ideas. Look at the reality of the situation.
It's a really savvy way to appeal to people, especially those who are maybe feeling lost and scared.
Oh, for sure. Remember, people were desperate for answers, for someone to trust. And Strang's supporters were offering a solution, a different way forward.
It makes you wonder if this whole pamphlet, The Diamond, was as much about promoting Strang as it was about discrediting his rivals.
It's definitely a possibility, but there's one more piece of this puzzle we need to talk about.
Okay, what's that?
The Diamond ends with this personal letter from Strang. And it's really fascinating. It's written to new converts, people who were just joining the movement from Britain and Ireland.
Interesting. So this is a few years after Smith's death. Things have settled down a little, but there's still a lot of uncertainty in the air.
Yeah, exactly.
What does Strang say to these new recruits?
He basically tells them, don't believe everything you hear. Question those who claim to have all the answers. He's really encouraging them to think for themselves.
Bold move, considering he's trying to convince them to follow him.
Right. But he doesn't shy away from that either. He positions himself as the true leader, the one appointed by God to guide the Latter-day Saints.
But how does he back that up? Especially with someone like Brigham Young gaining so much influence.
Well, he actually directly compares himself to Young, highlighting the struggles faced by those who chose to follow Young West.
Okay, like look at what happened to them. You don't want to be like them.
Pretty much, yeah. He talks about the poverty, the conflicts with Native American tribes, the harsh conditions of frontier life, all the things that made the journey west so difficult.
And he's framing all of that as a consequence of following the wrong leader.
Precisely. He's saying, if you want peace, if you want stability, follow me.
It's a powerful message, especially for someone who's new to the faith, looking for guidance.
It is. He's offering an alternative vision, a different path, at a time when people were desperate for direction.
The Diamond really is a fascinating window into this tumultuous time.
It really is. It reminds us that history is never simple. It's full of twists and turns and competing voices all vying for attention.
And sometimes the most important stories are the ones we haven't heard before.
Exactly. And by digging into these lesser-known narratives, we can gain a much richer understanding of the past.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the choices these early Latter-day Saints had to make.
And the weight of those choices, you know. They didn't have the luxury of knowing how things would turn out. They were just trying to find their way.
It's easy for us to look back and judge, but they were living through it, trying to make the best of a really tough situation.
Absolutely. And imagine being in their shoes, right?
Yeah.
You've lost your prophet. Your whole world has been turned upside down. And now you've got all these different people saying, follow me, each with their own interpretation of Scripture and their own promises for the future.
I mean, I can totally see how the Diamond would have been really convincing for some people.
Oh, definitely.
Like, what can we learn from Strang's story, even though his movement didn't become the dominant one?
That's a great question. And I think it gets at the heart of why we explore these different perspectives.
What do you mean?
Strang's story Even though it went in a different direction, it shows us how complex religious authority is, how powerful interpretation can be, especially in times of change and uncertainty.
Right, because it's about how they find meaning and belonging within those larger narratives.
Exactly. And it reminds us that history isn't always a straight line. There are these twists and turns, different paths that people could have taken. And sometimes it's those paths not taken that offer the most insightful lessons.
It's like we get so focused on the main story, the one that everyone knows, that we forget to look at the margins, at the other possibilities that were swirling around at the time.
And those other possibilities, they can be really illuminating.
They make you think, what if things had gone differently? What if Strang's movement had taken hold? It's a good reminder that history isn't inevitable. It's made up of choices, human choices.
And those choices matter. They shape the world we live in, even if we don't always realize it.
So for someone listening to this who's just heard all about James J. Strang and the diamond for the first time, what's the one thing you hope they take away from this deep dive?
I'd say don't be afraid to question, Don't be afraid to dig a little deeper, to explore different perspectives, to challenge your assumptions about the past.
Because there's always more to learn, right? History isn't static, it's an ongoing conversation, and we all have something to contribute to that conversation.
Exactly. So the next time you encounter a historical figure or event, don't just accept the standard narrative at face value. Ask some questions. See what other stories are out there waiting to be told. You never know what you might find.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the diamond. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the fascinating world of James J. Strang and the Latter-day Saint movement. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.